Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Medusa's Sisters by Lauren J. Hebert. I'll talk very briefly about the author, going to a spoiler-free overview of the plot, talk about what I liked about the book, what I didn't like about the book, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. Lauren J. Hebert is a novelist, originally from Boston, who's now living in Seattle. I think this is her debut novel. She also was a former middle school teacher, which is pretty interesting. And this book is a retelling of the Medusa myth from the perspective of her two sisters, the other two gorgons, Ciceno, and the other sister, I believe, is Eurali, and I'm sure I butchered both of those names. But it's essentially a retelling of their life with their sister, who is born and is, of the three sisters, the only one who is mortal. So it's essentially prophesied that Medusa is going to die at some point, and the question is, when is that going to happen? And the story really follows their perspectives as she ages and up to the point of her death and a little bit beyond her death. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it. The book is told in both first person and third person, which I thought was a little interesting. It's first person for Ciceno and third person for Eurali, and so you see the perspectives of both of them and how they have very, very distinct personalities. Ciceno is very much the elder child who is a rule follower and is really tasked with kind of being the imposer of order. And Eurali is really a mean, free-spirited person is how I would maybe describe it. She is kind of a rebel and kind of does what she wants to do. And their conflicts and how they have kind of a push-pull relationship, and Medusa is very often in the middle of that. And it's always a question of how much should they be protecting her. And Medusa is usually, almost always, kind of the third, is always seen as the most beautiful of the three of them. And so as they go throughout the world, there's that kind of conflict as well of jealousies. And and so the most interesting part to me, it was the relationship between the three sisters. The beginning especially, I think the beginning does a really good job of kind of bringing you up to speed with the myth of the birth of Medusa without throwing too much at you. And there is a cast of characters, a brief explanation of who everybody is, which I thought was actually really helpful for maybe people who are not super steeped in Greek mythology. At the beginning of the book that I referenced a couple times, that was helpful in understanding where I was. That was my favorite part, was really the beginning and the youth of the three sisters and how they kind of came to be, and their personalities and how those developed. The book, I think, also does a good job of going over, explaining to people who maybe don't know how just petty and small the Greek Parthenon is, and how it oftentimes wreaks havoc in the lives of people, not only the three sisters, two of whom are immortal, but also the humans that they interact with as well, and just how petty and small those people are. And there's kind of an underlining theme of the book about, or one of the sub-themes of the book, I think, is about immortality and what does it mean to actually be immortal, and how do we measure immortality, that I thought was kind of interesting. If I had any issues or downsides with the book, I do think the book drags at times. I think there is a couple of sections that I maybe would have cut out for time-wise. I think towards the end, especially the last, I think, third, really slowed down for me to a way that I found myself struggling to get through. I enjoyed very much the chapters with the sisters and them explaining their relationship. I think once Medusa kind of exits the story, the book kind of becomes a little bit different, and that tension is kind of lost in the book, and that's really the last third of the book. Is a lot of that is the grieving of the loss of Medusa and what that means for the sisters going forward. And I found that to be less interesting, I think, than the first two thirds. There is a section where she does explain Perseus and who Perseus is and how he is brought into the mythology. I thought that was a really interesting retelling, and I think that that is tied into the sense that these people are really just pawns in the games of the gods. And that's a thing that kind of comes up really well again and again. And I think Lauren J. Hebert does a good job of kind of hitting that note and playing that right. And there's I think a feminist streak throughout the book, and showing specifically the male gods how terrible their actions are to especially female mortals. But there's also instances of the female gods also being very devastating on people they claim to have affection for. And so I think really no one really escapes criticism. But I think there's a pretty strong female streak running through that book. And so your mileage may vary of how much you enjoyed that. I think she does She plays the note pretty strongly, but I think she plays it fairly as well. I don't think it is anything where you're hit over the head with it and it feels false. I think almost always it does feel there's a ring of truth to it, and she plays it straight with the characters when she is doing that. The only other issue I had, like I said, there are some plot points where it does drag a little bit. There's back and forth of whether or not she used the term slaves or enslaved people. I wish she had maybe just picked one and gone with it. I personally think she could have just gone with slaves, because that probably would have been more accurate to the time. Sometimes she uses enslaved people, sometimes she uses slaves, and whenever she used enslaved people, it just brought me out of the book. So that's the book. I did enjoy the retelling. I really liked the first 50 pages or so of the book. I really enjoyed that. The last 50 pages, I think, dragged a little bit and kind of brought my overall satisfaction with the book down. But if you are someone who's interested in retellings of Greek mythology, I think this is well done. I think it's interesting, and I think she brings a modern twist to it. And if I was going to recommend it to people, I would recommend it to people who are adults. Like a lot of Greek mythology, there is sexual assault, there is violence, there is... those things. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that would be, I think, difficult for some people to read. There is the attempted killing of children. So it's Greek mythology. It's a lot more violent than I think people really realize. And so if that is something, those things are all bothering you. I don't think Lauren goes into too deep detail on any of this stuff, but it is definitely there. And the characters are affected by those actions. And so if that's something that it would be hard for you, you may want to skip this one. But I do think it's an effective retelling of the myth, and I think it gives a different viewpoint and a modern viewpoint to Greek mythology that we oftentimes don't see. And so I thought for that reason alone, it was interesting. Like I said, the issues I had with it where it dragged a little bit. There's some side quests that I think you could have maybe cut out of the book and got it down to closer to like 320, 330 instead of 350, and I probably would have recommended that closer to that length. There's one part especially where I don't know how much is really added by the characters going somewhere. It's not a super lengthy passage, but I probably would have cut it for time. So that is Medusa's Sisters. Until next time, where I'll be reading another Dennis Lehane novel, Small Mercies. Until next time, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you've read this book and have feelings about it, please let me know. If you're someone who enjoys retellings of Greek mythology, I've read a couple for the channel, and I'll leave the link to some of those below if you want to check those out. Until next time, those are actually more Trojan War, so maybe I'll skip those for now. But until next time, bye.